Yeah. And 3, 2, 1. Rich Rising, beautiful souls. It's another episode of the Luna Darling podcast on the Man Monday. And I have a special guest with me today, Mr. Carl Omar Chataigne, who is also my dad. So say hi, Daddy.
Hello, everyone. Peace and blessings.
Peace of it. Okay, Dad. So I have you on tonight because I wanted to discuss the battle and the triumphs with addiction. And I couldn't have thought of a better guest to have on but you. So first and foremost,
Well,
how are
thank
you
you very
doing?
much.
You're very welcome, Daddy. So how are you doing this evening?
I am fine. I'm grateful and blessed.
Ashe, Ashe. Okay, Dad. So my first question for you this evening would be, can you please explain what is an addiction and what is the origin of an addiction?
Okay. Uh, First, let me preface by saying that I am a credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor since 2000. I worked in the field and various components. And my understanding is both the literature during studies and as well as personal experience come to understand addiction as being a disease, not a moral deficiency. The
Okay.
classification of disease is because it has certain symptoms. Addiction affects the individual in a physical, mental, and spiritual part of their bodies. The physical component is that of compulsion. Once you start using a substance, you can't stop using it. The mental aspect of the disease of addiction is that you have ever rolling streams of thought about using, if not about using, but about how to use or how to get the funds to use. And the third aspect that it affects on the individual is spiritual. And that spiritual aspect is the total self centeredness that the world revolved around the addict or the person that's suffering with the disease,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, what I come to understand, in order to attack this disease, it has to be dealt with all the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects simultaneously, all at one time.
Right.
And the thing is, with all the studies, it still do not allow us the information as to what makes someone prone to this disease and what make others not.
Mm-hmm.
But it is something. It's a something that causes an individual to go down this spiral downward tread.
Right. Okay. All right. So my next question for you, Daddy, would be, do you think trauma, whether past or current, from experiences, relationships, abandonment, or abuse, etc., initiate the coping mechanism of the addiction?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I can only tell you about my experience. The thing is that unresolved trauma is fuel for the disease of addiction. It doesn't necessarily have to initiate it, but it is the fuel. By that I mean my inability to learn how to deal with trauma or particular situations that revolves around feelings and dealings with my feelings
Mm-hmm.
was warped. I never got the information on how to deal with my feelings in a positive manner. I'll go further to say that I'm the eldest child, eldest son So, and I was raised in a single parent household by my mother.
Mhm. Right.
So as I passed through adolescence and was trying to learn the meaning of manhood, I ventured to the corners.
Mhm.
And at
Mhm.
the corners, their interpretation of how to deal with trauma and adverse feelings was to get a sip of wine.
Mhm.
You know, we
To
would
numb it
stand on
in
the
a sense.
corner and whatever the feeling was, get a bottle of plug. That's what we used to call it back in the days.
Mhm.
Get a bottle of wine, start drinking and singing doo-wop songs and so on. That would give me a better feeling than when I initially came to the corner from.
Right.
Because I might
Right.
have came to the corner from an adverse discussion with my mother about
Mhm.
responsibilities, making me feel less than. I would go to the
Right.
corner, running away from home, running away from that feeling, and they would advise me, wrong though it may have been,
Mhm.
but unfortunately it worked. Because I started feeling good drinking that wine and singing with the fellas and having an experience of community,
Right.
as
Right.
sick as though it may be, but that's what happened.
Of a sense of unconditional love, in a sense.
Yeah, that I fitted in.
Right.
You know, people understood me.
Mhm.
You know, that kind of nurturance, negative though it may been, it was still one of the requirements of a human being. We need to be we want and need to be nurtured. We want and need to be accepted. What
I
happened?
agree. I agree. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I could still hear you.
Okay. All right. So that kind of leads to my next question. Uh, is there a
Okay.
logical standpoint of a gateway drug, or do you think that the tolerance of oneself is what causes the introduction to harder drugs?
No, what happened is, as I was saying before, is there are certain people that just predisposed is the word I'm looking for, or
Mhm.
predisposed to be addict. And my experience as knowing for a fact that I have the predisposition of being an addict is that addiction is progressive in nature.
Mhm.
Addiction is incurable and it's progressive, and if left untreated, it will be fatal. So the
Right.
progression part of the disease of addiction is that the more you use, the higher your tolerance get. By that I mean by tolerance is that you need more of the same substance to attain the same feelings that you got previously.
Right.
So
Right.
if it was
Right.
like half a pint of some liquid courage to get me to get courage, then by next week it would need a whole pint.
Right. 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 It's kind of
That's the
feeding the
progression.
urge in a sense.
Because with drugs,
Right.
right, the higher it takes you, the lower it brings you. So you have to use just to
Mhm.
get on back on the equilibrium status.
Right.
So
Okay.
the predisposition is that once you start using, you need to use more to get the same effect.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so in the process of recovery, should one identify the triggers of addiction to combat the emotions tied to addiction?
And no, I would put it, the answer this way. One need
Hmm.
to combat the addiction in order to see what the triggers is.
Right.
Because first and foremost, you have to stop using. You
Hmm.
know, and there's various ways to do that. And more as the government and the powers that be recognize addiction as a disease and not a moral deficiency, there's more
Mhm.
money being invested into a way of detoxification, a healthy way to detox. Because the history
Mhm.
has been like they used to put people in the cooler tank for alcoholism. And come to find out that detoxing from alcohol without medical supervision caused a lot
Mm.
of death.
Yes, Daddy, I agree.
But there are some medical issues that goes along with the substance that's being used.
Mhm.
So the first thing you have to do is stop using. And you have to stop using in a healthy way, in a healthy environment. Like now, uh, once upon a time, they didn't consider cocaine as being a physically addictive drug.
Mhm.
But with the advent of crack and the fact that it depletes a lot of the nutrients in the body, because cocaine causes you to sweat profusely and it changes
Mhm.
your heart rate and it administer some delusional stress on the body, meaning that
Okay.
the organs are overtaxed. So
Mhm.
now that you realize that a person need a lot of fluid, and they treat it a lot of time with the Gatorade because of the electrolytes that's in it and other baby formulas,
Okay.
along with a regimen of vitamins and definitely sleep, rest.
Mhm.
Those are the prerequisite of a cocaine detox.
Okay. Allowing the body to be rejuvenated in a sense.
Right. Yeah. So it's like at that point, without a drug, that you start feeling once again, because
Right.
initially addicts use to run away from a feeling.
Yeah, to numb themselves.
Exactly. So now when you
Mhm.
take the drug out, you can start feeling again. And then it's at this point you start giving them positive way of
Right. That
coping
that was my
mechanism.
next question, Daddy. My next
Mhm.
question is, how important is motivation and holding space for a recovering addict?
It is very important. I'm from the school that the disease of addiction is more powerful than the individual. So
Mhm.
you need the support of other people like minded, other people that are nurturing, other people that understand what you're going through to make the path smoother, to make it okay for you to feel, to understand that
Mhm.
feeling is a fact, but it's not a fact what you are feeling. It's a fact that you feel, but what you feel
Mhm.
may not necessarily be a fact.
Right.
So I'm also apt to the school of thought that addiction is a family disease. By
Mhm.
that I mean, if you're not directly affected by the disease, there's an affect to the family unit, you know,
Right.
because as an addict, you run away from the responsibility of being a father, being a son, being a brother, but
Mhm.
just being a member of the community.
Right. Right.
So you're being an addict is like all encompassing. And that's how come I feel personally that it was like a government conspiracy, because I also like to follow the history
Right.
of my community in these United States. And the thing is that during the late 60s, mid 60s, the late 60s, on top of black people trying to get their civil rights, they were
Mhm.
demanding their human, and people were being active and people were educating themselves. There was a lot of our leaders that, if not through formal education like Martin Luther King,
Mhm.
came self-education like Malcolm X. And
Right.
they
Right.
were making a movement for we as Black individuals to stand on our feet. And the fact that
Right.
we were starting the race at a handicap. So the education itself was frightening to the powers that be. Then they had this COINTELPRO, because apparently people that survived Vietnam was coming back and
Mm-hmm.
using the GI Bill to educate themselves. And then the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover started this COINTELPRO. And this COINTELPRO started bringing back heroin. Instead of treating the Vietnam veterans that came back
Mm-hmm.
with heroin habits, they would just discharge them under undesirable or general discharges, which would take away from their benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and not treating the heroin habit, which is a physical habit, you know, meaning that if you didn't die, you feel like you was going to die and withdraw
Mm-hmm.
from it. And on top of that, they started bringing the heroin into the neighborhood.
Right.
And after that came the Rockefeller program, especially up here, up in the East in New York City. Rockefeller started a whole bunch of methadone programs, you know,
Right.
to keep track of addicts, to keep them sedated, to keep
Mm-hmm.
them asleep. And that was taken away from our community, you know. And that's how come I feel it's like part of my amends to the community to educate people about this disease of addiction and how it steals from us our humanity. I liken addiction to, or active addiction to, placing your spirit in a coma. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to deal with your conscience if it's in a coma. And that's
Right,
what the
Daddy.
methadone program did. It like put a lot of people's spirit and humanity in a coma. And to raise them from that coma, you need some loving and nurturing hands and nurturing community. You know,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, there's not enough education done on this scourge on our community, which is what I call
I
it's a
agree.
scourge. It's a disease similar to COVID virus, the COVID, but just targeted to certain individuals. You know, now
Right.
people are really recognize the disease concept because it is now in their community. You know, with the advent of these legal drugs, these legal
Right.
narcotics.
Right.
You know, and the
Mm-hmm.
human body don't know the difference between a human narcotic, I mean, a
I agree.
prescription narcotics or a narcotic from the corner. All it
Yeah,
knows is that
exactly
we need
that.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So you basically answered the next question that I was going to give you, right? But
What's that?
on on the because the question was is there were many eras in life where drugs plagued our communities. The first being the Confederate War with the morphine, and which
Mhm.
was first introduced and then abused, right? And then the Vietnam War with heroin, as you just explained, and then the hippie era with the psychedelics and the marijuana, and then
Mm,
there was an upgrade to supposedly a high grade drug, which would have been cocaine, and then
mm,
we got hit with the infectious spread of crack cocaine, right? So
mhm,
now there are so many other drugs like ecstasy and the bath salts and the meth and fentanyl that has been at an all time high of killing people, right? Um,
mhm.
can you describe those eras and the tragedies that took place? And in your opinion, what era do you believe was the worst era of drugs? And
Oh, okay.
looking back on it now, what wisdom do you think you learned from that era?
Oh, that's okay. Let me take that question in parts. First, as I was saying before,
Okay.
I like going back looking at history as where we as a people, meaning black people, were as far
Mhm.
as like self-motivating. And we as a people
Right.
insisting on our human rights as opposed to civil rights. And
Mhm.
how the drug has always been an obstacle placed in front of us to diffuse our movement.
Right.
Like I was saying, during the Vietnam era, in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a concerted effort to keep the Vietnam War going on because all that was getting drafted at a certain point was black people or poor white people.
Right. Right.
And during the hippie and flower power era, it was more about recognizing that we were all in the same boat. They were sending us thousands
Mhm.
of miles away to get killed. And that I'm talking about black people and poor white people. So they
Right.
united. And so if you survived the Vietnam War and came back here and they were still sending your baby brothers and cousins over there to get killed or to get addicted,
Right.
you
Right.
do something about it. And as they became more organized, they put more drugs on the street. As opposed to just
Mhm.
getting addicted in Vietnam, they kept the addiction going on. Here, when you got discharge on the states, by
Right.
infiltrating a cheap heroin, which derived from the morphine, which is like the
Mhm.
scrap from how morphine is made. So they put that
Okay.
on the streets of the cities, mostly inner cities, where
Mhm.
poor whites gravitate to and black people because of
Right.
economic situation they had to live in those areas. And so they infested that with the drugs. And heroin became epidemic similar to how the crack came epidemic,
Mhm.
but it was more visible because an addict didn't care whether it was day or night. When their body craved the drug, they would get it. So there were syringe needles all down the sidewalks, and people were
Mhm.
nodding in the middle of the streets and urinating and feces,
Right.
defecating
Right.
in all the streets. This is like early 70s I'm talking about.
Okay.
And there were certain people that was getting rich off of that because the government was giving them a pass, you know,
Mhm.
and like Nicky Bonds, Frank Lucas, and those type
Right.
of people were getting rich and realizing that they was getting rich off the misery of other people's back.
Right.
So
Dad.
then they got arrested, and then drug became a panic, and people was going all crazy.
Mhm.
The mental trauma of not having your heroin or your opiate, your body would go into convulsions, you would have chills, sweat
Mhm.
profusely, and so they started these riots. They started having riots and burning down cities, like the 69 riots and stuff like that. And after they killed
Mhm.
Martin Luther King, it was all done.
Right.
So it was at that point they got the drug from Hitler, the one that Hitler encouraged the Nazi regime to develop because they couldn't get morphine. So they developed methadone.
Okay.
Methadone was a
Wow.
Nazi regime invention so that he could put his soldiers back into the field and they could do surgery on them without the morphine that the Allies had blocked.
Right.
So they was using methadone for those purposes. And they also
Wow.
use methadone to boost up their soldiers. So what they do, they use the Nazi theme on us. They put methadone on the street corners of every block. So now black people addicted to heroin was running up to a building in a corner somewhere, lining up to take methadone.
Right.
And that sedated them for a minute. But then someone with intelligence, without a chemistry degree, you understand, found out a cheaper way to cook crack back to its base.
Right.
Take out all the impurities that they had cut the cocaine with and bring it back to its base. That's why initially it used to call base. They used to cook it and put it in a like hookah pipe and stuff like that. And it was like the intellectual high class high. But somebody figured how to do it on a mass production level and cut it up and started selling it for $3. From
Wow.
$3, it went to $5. From 5 to 10. Now we talking about the crack era now. This is like early 80s, 85 to 89. And man, even more people was getting rich off this crack business than with the heroin. Because money is power in a capitalistic state.
Absolutely.
And there was too many young black men getting money. And so they had the war on drugs. Even though the raw cocaine in the powder form was coming from rich parts down in Florida, California, the border town in Texas.
Right.
Well, there's kids out here in Brooklyn and the south side of Queens becoming millionaires.
Right.
You know? And instead of staying in the game, they started investing into hip hop. Just like in the early days of Al Capone and the Depression era, what was that? Bootlegging.
Right.
You know,
With
a lot of
alcohol.
people, including the Kennedys, yes, got rich from bootlegging and went into other business and now legitimate millionaires, such as the Rockefellers, not just the Kennedys, you know, and various other people. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
black people was young black men was taking a page from that history, and now they was using the crack money to invest back into the community.
Right.
And that wasn't part of the plan. And again, what happens is that more and more the product that they put on the street to infiltrate the young minds are more corrosive or more destructive. You know, to where you're talking about cocaine-induced psychosis. There's a lot of smart minds that were devastated and beaten by this addiction. You know, this addiction to me is like an entity all to itself. I don't believe when Hoover and the COINTEL staff members unleashed addiction, they knew what they was doing. Because now the addiction is coming home to roost, like Malcolm X said, because fentanyl deaths are more in the white community than it's ever been in the black community.
Yes.
It's at epidemic level right now. So all those, as I look on it, addiction has always been a tool to subjugate individuals, to make waste. the God-given talent they had,
Right.
you know.
Okay,
And
so
now,
that goes to our next question.
okay.
So looking back at it all now, what wisdom did you learn from that experience?
Mm. The wisdom that I learned from that experience is that no man is an island. You know, it is great to
Mm-hmm.
be self-supporting, but whenever you start to think that you are self-sufficient, you open up a door to an abyss that's darker than the darkest of night. So
Mm-hmm.
now I've learned the importance of family and friends and
Right.
people that I am able to share with them my innermost feelings. Because that
Mm-hmm.
treasure, that is the God, the gift of a creator. You know, that is the gift of humanity. It's like the ability to share your feeling with someone else and knowing that they understand, they feel the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we are
Right.
not alone. You know, the
Right.
community as a whole is a powerful instrument. And that's how come I think it is so important to fight addiction with the whole background of the family, the community, the neighborhood, and so on.
Okay. So do you believe that your challenges with addiction allow you to better serve others in their personal rehabilitation journey?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because there's a lot of stuff I can understand that a non-addict cannot, you know, because sometimes I don't know about anybody else, but I find it easier for me to express myself without having to explain every little detail of what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
it's like if somebody never lived in Williamsburg houses, you can't tell them about block 1 and block 4. You
Right.
know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
It's
they
like,
wouldn't
you know,
understand. Right.
you say, yeah,
You would
you
have to
remember
be
block
there to
4?
understand.
Right.
Right. Okay. I understand where you're coming from with that. Okay,
Yeah.
Dad. So, most children or family of addicts believe that addicts, uh, they don't have any love, respect, or loyalty or empathy towards them or life. Is that a false narrative? And does it cause as much pain to the addicts as it does their loved ones?
Mm, that's a two-parter there. The thing is, no, they are wrong. The addicts do have feelings. The addicts do know. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that they know and they are so sensitive to it that they have to use more substance to numb the feelings of regret, the feeling of disappointment,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of guilt, the feelings of guilt, shame. They do understand that. And what happens is that once you get clean, in order to stay off the substance, you have to address some of these feelings of guilt, shame, remorse.
Right.
You have to do that in order to be able to live within your own spirit, because
Right.
the drug will dictate some behaviors that you would never have thought of doing were you not using.
Right.
Again, that's where I go into it's a family disease, because the people
Mm-hmm.
close to the active addict is the one that suffers the most. You know,
Right.
they'll call that in military collateral damage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So part of the recovery process is making amends, making restitutions to where you could gather some esteem to combat the shame and the guilt.
Right. Okay, that was one of the questions that I have for you also. Part of the recovery process is taking accountability and offering apologies to those that you've hurt along your dark
Now,
journey.
more than
Have you?
apologies, you have to make restitution.
Okay. So my
It's
question to
more
you
than
is
apology.
have
You can't go around saying I'm sorry all the time.
yeah.
You have
We
to
know
make
that.
restitution. You
Okay.
have to give back what you took whenever possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you had that experience, Dad, and how did it help you with your recovery and rehabilitation process?
Yeah, I've had that experience as far as
Hmm.
restitutions and there's some financial restitutions because I used to like to hang a lot of paper and play with plastic, you know. So I had to
Okay.
make financial restitutions to some of the banks, you know.
Hmm.
Well, in your case, I had to make some financial restitution to child support in early
Hmm.
recovery, you know. What else? But I think the hardest restitutions I've ever had to make was like on a personal level, you know,
Hmm.
telling my mother, how sorry and so full of remorse I was for some of the stuff that I drug her through, you know,
Right.
not being a son all the time for her, you know,
Hmm.
being the big brother that she wanted me to be, you know, that kind of stuff. And I was so grateful that I did it, especially when she passed. I realized
Hmm.
that I had 10 years with her being the son that she had envisioned me to be instead of what
Right.
I
Right.
was,
Hmm.
you know. So that was big esteem building thing for me. Because I remember when she was in the hospital dying from leukemia, cancer, that I went there one Saturday and she was like her pedicure and manicure because my god brother
Hmm.
used to it. So I went over there one Saturday and she couldn't get out. So I did her feet, put polish on there, polish, soaked it,
Hmm.
stuff. And man, I didn't realize how grateful she was and how big of a deal it was to her until I came
Yeah.
there today, you know. And the whole I became famous for that day. The whole hospital knew me as the guy that gave the cure, you
Yeah.
know.
She told
Yeah, yeah,
everybody that
yeah,
she
yeah,
that was a
yeah,
highlight for her. Trust me. Yep.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And to me, that was the biggest amends I could have ever made. You know.
Right. Well, I do want to say something. So as a child with you battling addiction, I firsthand didn't have to deal with it. I firsthand didn't have to see you at your lowest point. And so I do want to thank you for that. But I also want to thank you for always coming when you said you was going to come.
Mm.
Always picking me up on the weekends, always installing beautiful things into me, music and jazz and art and empathy and sympathy and laughter and humor, fashion, all of those beautiful things that you gifted me with as a child, I still carry forth and I give it to my children. So I do want to tell you that though you may have felt that you weren't Superman, you always were Superman to me.
Uh, Thank you. That's so nice of you to say. I am so grateful. Uh, but let me tell you something I never told you either.
Mhm.
Let me tell you that I am grateful to the God of my understanding that deals in grace and unmerited favor as opposed to karma. I understand
Mhm.
him giving me you as the best gift of my life. Let me tell you why. When you was being potty trained, I think you must have been about maybe 3 years, if that.
Mhm.
I was in the grip of my addiction, and I was holding the bathroom hostage because I was self-medicating. Then I heard this cry, this whimpering outside the door. I cracked the door, and it was you standing in a puddle of urine. And the thing
Oh.
is that you was crying because you thought it was your fault that you couldn't hold your little bladders because I was
Mhm.
holding the bathroom hostage. It was at that
Right.
point I was trying to soothe your anguish that I saw in
Mhm.
your eyes what I had became
Mhm.
through active addiction. And it was something up. And it was at that point I said, I'm going to go into treatment, which I
Mhm.
never, long-term treatment, that is, which I had fought. That was the only thing I didn't try. So I
Mhm.
said, I'm going to try that. And from that point on, I pursued long-term treatment till it got me in down Lower East Side, where he used to visit me.
Right. Right.
And that was the start back in 93. And for
Well,
that,
well,
I'm
thank
eternally grateful
thank you, Daddy,
because you
for
gifted
choosing
me
me.
with another opportunity again.
Right. Okay. So with that being said, Dad, what advice would you give a loved one of an addict?
I tell them, keep loving them, but sometimes you have to love them from a distance because you cannot,
Mhm.
I don't care, addict or not, but you cannot deny anyone their pain. And a lot of time it's the pain that brings us to the realization that we need help.
Right.
So I just tell
Okay.
them
So
to keep 3 eyes on them and love them from a distance.
right. Okay. So what advice would you give to an addict that's struggling with the thought of rehabilitation?
The advice is like, you tried everything else. Why don't you try this?
Mhm.
Because most of the time, people that are resistant to it have never tried it, you know, because the thought is more fearful than the actual doing.
Right. Right. I agree
Because
with you with that.
it appear more difficult than it actually is.
Yes. Okay. All right, Dad. What
Fear of the
advice would
unknown.
you give of the unknown? Right. What advice would you give 18-year-old Carlo?
Mm. If he was willing to listen to advice, that's the big piece right there. That's a
Right,
big piece of the
right.
puzzle. You know, is he gonna listen? Yeah. My advice would be like, feel what you feel. You're not gonna die from feeling it, and that
Right.
men do cry. I think that's the
Mhm.
best advice I would have given myself when I was 18. It's like, men do cry. Because I rolled around with that false narrative for a long time. It
Right.
caused
And it was
me,
more damaging.
yes, yes, so much more damaging than actually crying.
Right. Okay. All right. What long-term emotional scars linger after rehabilitation is had?
Repeat that question.
What are the long-term emotional scars that linger after rehabilitation?
I think scars, or I would call it regret, that I didn't do this earlier and have more
Okay.
time with my,
Mhm.
that's the regret that still persists till this day. And the 24th of this month is going to make a 20 years since he passed. And I
Mhm.
still am scarred not having more time with her. Because she was
Right.
amazing, you know.
I agree.
Mm.
I agree. Okay. How can an addict fight against their addiction?
With a lot of help, with an open mind and an open mouth. By that I mean a closed mouth won't get fed. I'm talking about asking for help. You know, learning humility is knowing someone's limitation. Humility for me is knowing my own limitations. Humility for
Right.
me is telling you you hurt my feeling, not knowing whether you're going to do it again or not. But the fact that I said you did it, I acknowledge it.
Mhm.
Acknowledge where you at. That's the best advice or suggestion I would give an addict in recovery. Know that we are human, that we are not perfect, that we shoot for perfection, but we seldom receive it.
Okay. All right, Daddy. What are some of the excuses an addict will use when they are in a desperate state?
Ah, man. Woo. There's a zillion of them. I heard one recently where this woman talked about she went to cash her check in the bank, and the bank was robbed, and they only took her check when her mother asked for the rent.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And you know
Can
the
you
alarming
picture
part
that?
about that, Dad, is they believe their own stories majority of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that's
That's the
serious. Yeah,
saddening part
yeah,
of it all. Yeah,
yeah. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. All right. At your age, do you feel that you are serving your life's purpose?
Yeah, I think so at this point. Because I do what I can for others, and I'm open to sharing my time with other people. So, and I think that's the purpose the Creator had in store for me, to be of help
Mm-hmm.
instead of being a menace.
Right. To be of service of others.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All righty.
whenever
Uh,
possible. I'm not
well, it's
talking. I'm running around looking for people to help, but I'm talking about
right,
being in the place.
right. Being in a
Yeah,
place to be able to assist and to help.
right.
Okay. Okay. If you can change one thing about the restraint of addiction, what would it be?
Being a prisoner, the restraint of addiction is that addiction makes you a prisoner. It makes you limited where
Mm-hmm.
you go, how far you go away from the substance, it
Mm-hmm.
away from the because everything in your decision making processes are, excuse me, revolve around the substance. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can't travel. You can't just get on a plane and go wherever you're going, you know, if your
Right.
stash is not in place. So
Mm-hmm.
addiction make you a prisoner most of the time of a 4 block area and no more.
Okay.
You won't
Wow.
leave the block.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. What was the passion behind becoming an addiction counselor, Daddy?
I found that it easy to communicate some of what I've learned to others. And that connection is a lot of time what lights the fuse to getting on to the recovery.
Right.
And
I
so
agree with that.
it's like learning with that and then finding out that there are academics that are in need of some information. By me going through the
Mhm.
academic route and being a counselor, I found that I could better educate some of the academians,
Right.
or what they call school people, school book
Right.
people.
The scholars in a sense.
Yeah,
Um
exactly. Yes.
okay. What do you want to tell the world about addiction, Dad?
Addiction is a vicious disease that do not discriminate. And once you let it out the box, it's liable to infect anything and everything.
Mhm.
So do not play with it because it's not a house cat. It's more of a Bengal tiger. That's
Right.
the best way to describe it to you.
Okay. And for those who do not know, what are the steps to recovery?
Steps to recovery. First, you have to admit that you are powerless over the substance.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then you have to stop. Once you stop, you have to place some spiritual principles in your life instead of the street principles that we had survived through all these years, you know, such
Mhm.
as honesty, where lying and conning, scamming was the principles of the street.
Mhm.
Or you talk about courage, where fear is what we strive for in active addiction. Fear is
Mhm.
what made our adrenaline pump. Fear is what made us do some of the stuff we did, especially fear of running out of the substance that we crave.
Right.
You know, so we had to change those principles into more spiritual principles, you know, principles of being a human being, you know, such as honesty, open mindedness, the willingness, you know,
Mhm.
courage, you know, resourcefulness, you know, integrity,
Mhm.
you know, those kind of things is what human beings strive for and get rewarded for emotionally. And it's what the
Right.
Bible is about too. It's what the Quran talks about. It's what the Torah
Mhm.
talks about. Those
Mhm.
principles are what makes us full rounded individuals. But the
Okay.
streets have a totally different principle, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes you have to adapt them in order just to survive. But once you get into recovery, you don't need them outdated skills, them coping
Right.
mechanisms, you know.
Mhm.
You start to learn to be a human being again.
Right. Okay. All right, Dad. Most addicts are fearful of recovery, and some recovered addicts are fearful of relapse, mainly due to the fear of the unknown. Can you explain the experience of an inpatient rehabilitation center?
Well, you know, it's funny in the wording. They talk a rehabilitation center. You know, some people rehabilitation center don't help them because they never had a good habit anyway to rehabilitate too. You know, they
Okay.
had to habilitate. You know,
Right.
because depending on
You
where
have
you
to
come,
unlearn, relearn.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
and then the thing with the relapse is that you already know what it is and you scared of it.
Right.
Relapse, you know what it is and you scared of it. And a relapse a lot of time will happen because you forget how bad it was. Because
Mhm.
the disease of addiction will lull you to sleep. It make it easy for you to forget the horrors and some of the mishaps that happened to you in active addiction. You have that nostalgic recall. You remember when you came off one day or 1 hour,
Right.
but you
Mhm.
forget the 20 hours before that, what you went through.
Right.
That's why it's good to be around people like yourself to keep constantly reminding you of where you came from so you can move on
Right.
and better things, you know.
Absolutely. Okay.
So
All
those are
right,
the
Dad.
different.
Uh, you are very popular among the commitment circuit gatherings, right? Can you explain what exactly is a commitment and what your role is?
Okay. Well, a lot of time people would like you to share your experience, strength, and hope.
Mhm.
Experience what you've been through. Strength is where you're at now, and the hope is where you hope to be in a couple of months or a couple of years, depending on your age, you know. So
Mhm.
that's a when someone asks you to do that, it's like you have to be willing to open up and tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
And so being that I came through that phase of fear of what people may think, or there's somebody I burnt that's still looking for me.
Right.
Everyone go through that in early recovery process. But I've
Mhm.
been around clean long enough to where that don't phase me anymore. So I tell it like it is, the whole entire story of
Right.
you know, where I'm at now and where I hope to be. So that's my experience, strength, and hope. And they like my commitment because of the honesty. You know,
Mhm.
people that been where you've been know what you're telling them is true or not. They could tell a
Right.
made up
Right.
story. So
Mhm. Okay.
in that
All right,
sense,
Daddy. So before we go, I have some affirmations for you that I would like for us to recite together. Okay.
okay,
So when you're ready, I want you to get comfortable and take a couple deep breaths, and we will start reciting whenever you are ready. Okay.
okay,
Okay. All right. So we're gonna take a couple deep breaths to start first. And three, two, one, inhale, nice and slow. And we're going to hold it. And now you can release nice and easy with a sigh if you like. And we're going to do this breathing two more times. So we're going to inhale nice and easy again. And hold and release. And one more time. We are going to do a deep inhalation and hold and release. Every day, in every way, I am feeling better.
every day in every way, I am feeling better.
I experience happiness on my own.
I experience happiness on my own.
I have the power to choose my thoughts.
I have the power to choose my thought.
I am gentle with myself as I heal.
I am gentle with myself as I heal.
I look inside myself as a source of joy.
I look inside myself as a source of joy.
Each day, I am getting stronger and healthier.
Each day I am getting stronger and healthier.
I am more than my past.
I am more than my past.
I love and respect myself and my body.
I love and respect myself and my body.
I am so proud of myself.
I am so proud of myself.
I am in love with the person I am becoming.
I am in love with the person I am becoming.
I am excited for the limitless possibilities that await me.
I am excited over the limitless possibilities that awaits me.
I am in charge of the narrative of my life.
I am in charge with the narrative of my life.
I choose community and connection.
I choose community and connection.
I see myself as pure, safe, and loved.
I see myself as pure, safe, and loved.
I deserve to experience happiness and hope.
I deserve to experience happiness and hope.
I am worthy of great things in my life.
I am what?
I am worthy
Okay. I am worthy of
of
great
great things
things in my
in
life.
my life. Yes. I am mentally strong enough to let go of any addictions or habits that do not serve me. So I
I
am
am
mentally strong
healthy.
enough
I am mentally strong enough to let
to
go
let go of any addictions
of any addiction
or habits that do not
or
serve me.
habit that don't serve me.
Yes. At any moment,
At any moment,
I feel myself falling into temptation.
I feel myself falling into temptation
I say I am stronger than this thing.
and say, I am stronger than this thing.
Yes. Every day I get stronger and stronger.
Every day I get stronger and stronger.
I love myself.
I love myself.
I am thankful
I am thankful
and I am blessed.
and I am blessed.
Ashe, Daddy.
Ashe, baby. Love you.
I love you more. Thank you for being on my episode this week. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you for your honesty and your transparency and your vulnerability, Dad. I'm sure it will help
All
somebody
right.
along.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be of service.
Of course. Okay, guys,
Okay.
thank you for joining this week's Luna Darling podcast. I will see you guys again on Thursday. Good night, all. Thanks, Daddy.
All right. Thank you. Good night. Love
You're
you.
welcome. Good night. Love you more.
Okay.